on another series of discussions on one of the most apt topics chosen under research, which is profession yesterday, today, and tomorrow. When we talk about the profession yesterday, today, and tomorrow, it means we are going to deep dive, share, exchange the thoughts, the knowledge, the experience, what has been gained so far and since time in the past, present, and future. And I feel an immense pleasure in witnessing such high dignitaries who will be discussing on this very apt topic. And who other than can do justice better than them? They are the torchbearers of the ICI and have made ICI reach its pinnacle at their time. And they have seen the profession grow leaps, height, and high. So from the entire team of research committee and ICI, I welcome CATS Vishwanath sir, past president ICI, CA Mukund Chitle sir, past president ICI, CA Amajit Chopra sir, past president ICI, and CA K Raghu sir, past president ICI. I welcome you, sir, on behalf of the entire team of ICI, the panelists, and the entire ICI fraternity. They have been instrumental in making ICI and other things reach at its height. I also welcome CA Maitri Swaminathanji, who is the moderator of the session, taking us through this extremely vivacious discussion where many things could be explored as per the experience what Vishwanathan sir, Raghu sir, Chopra sir, and Chitle sir have collectively gathered, which we'll be sharing with all of us. Maitri is the founder of ESG Global and is a firm in the space of environment, social, and governance consulting. She has 3 decades of experience and is a rank-holding chartered accountant and company secretary. She has been a chairman and CFO for Indian operations and regional finance controller. A very warm welcome to you, Maitri. And I'm sure that you shall be moderating the session and making all of us go through the past, what we were not able to experience through the thoughts of our past presidents. Over to you, Maitri. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitali. Thank you. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to our panelists, our very own past presidents of the ICAI, who've graced this panel discussion with their presence. Welcome, sir, and it's indeed a rare occasion to have 4 stalwarts of our profession together addressing our fellow chartered accountants. We are honored and privileged, gentlemen, to have an opportunity to hear your views on the chartered accountancy profession. Today's topic covers the profession yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and who's better placed to share their views than this panel. You know, this panel has over 150 years of combined experience in shaping and leading the CA profession. So I'd like to begin by introducing our esteemed panelist, CATS Vishwanath sir. CATS Vishwanath sir has been the president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India in the year 96-97. So you were the president when I was just completing my CA. So it's indeed an honor to share a panel with you and be on the same panel. And I never imagined that would ever happen. He's also been the president of the South Asian Federation of Accountants. He's been the chair from the India side of the Indo-UK Accountancy Task Force, the former chair of the Standing Committee on Accounting Issues of the Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority. He's been the India member on the board of the International Accounting Standards Committee and a member on various committees of the ICAI. He's been a member in working groups of the Government of India and regulatory authorities on taxation, capital market, insurance, public enterprises, banking, accounting, auditing standards. He's been the chairman of the National E-Governance Services till 2021 and the chairman of Alstom T&D India Limited. He's held independent directorships in many large public or publicly listed companies, such as the Karnataka Bank Limited, LIC Nomura Mutual Fund Asset Management Company, and he's been a distinguished alumni awardee of the Shriram College of Commerce. He's adept at audit and attest services, taxation services, management services, and corporate services. A very warm welcome to you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Next, I'd like to invite and introduce CA Mukund Manohar Chitale. Sir has over 40 years of experience on advising companies on their business, financial, and strategic matters. Mr. Chitale is widely regarded as an expert in accounting and auditing matters in India. His opinions are well sought on a variety of complex accounting and auditing matters. He's traveled extensively to a number of countries and has given over 1,000 lectures on a variety of topics at national and international levels. He was the chairman of the National Advisory Committee on Accounting Standards. He was the president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants during 97-98. He's been a member of the Central Council of the ICAI prior to that, and a chairman of the Western India Regional Council during 1984-85. He was a member of the International Auditing Practices Committee of the International Federation of Accountants during January 1998 to June 2000. He served as governing council member of Banking Codes and Standards Board of India. He's been nominated by the Reserve Bank of India to that position, also been a member of the Company Law Advisory Committee, a member of the Advisory Board on Bank, Commercial and Financial Frauds, appointed by the Central Vigilance Commission, and a member of the Primary Advisory Market Committee of SEBI. He's a chairman of the Standing Committee on Accounting Issues, constituted by the Insurance Regulatory Development Authority of India. It's indeed an honor to have you in our midst, sir. Welcome. Next, I'd like to invite and introduce CA Dr. Amarjeet Chopra. Dr. Chopra has been in the profession for a period of 49 years. After doing his post-graduation from Delhi University, Dr. Amarjeet Chopra qualified as a chartered accountant and went on to do his doctorate on the topic NPA management by banks. So such a relevant topic, and it's indeed an honor to understand. Would be an honor to understand how you did this, chose the topic over the course of today's discussion. He's the past president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, served during the year 2010-11. He's also served as the chairman of the Northern India Regional Council of the ICAI, been a past chairman of the National Advisory Committee on Accounting Standards. As chairman of the National Advisory Committee on Accounting Standards, he was responsible for introducing and implementing the Ind AS in India. He also headed accounting and auditing standard boards of the board of the ICAI for 2 years each. Further, he has headed several standing and non-standing committees of the ICAI. He's also served as a part-time member of the NAFRA and as member of Investor Education and Protection Fund Authority of the Government of India. He was also on the board of the South Asian Federation of Accountants, the SAFA, and the Confederation of Asian Pacific Accountants, the CAPA, and IRDA. He was a member of Professional Accountancy Organization and Development Committee, the PAODC of the IFAC, for a period of 3 years and was its vice chair as well in the year 2013-14. He's presently serving as a member of the Corporate Laws Committee of the Government of India. He's been nominated by the government on the board of reputed companies such as Bank of Baroda, Indian Bank, and the Garden Reach Shipbuilders and Engineers Limited. He was chairman of the audit committee in all the 3 companies. He's been conferred membership of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Australia and New Zealand and an honorary life membership of the Institute of International Accountants in London. He's also a resource person for the IMF and has conducted missions in Mauritius, Seychelles, and Bhutan. He's delivered more than 3,500 lectures on matters of professional interest in India and abroad. So welcome to the session. It's an honor indeed to have you in our midst. Last, but certainly not the least, I have the privilege of introducing CA Raghu. Raghu, sir, with over 32 years of experience, has been the former president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India for the year 2014-15. He's the founding partner of Messrs. K. Raghu and Company, a leading firm of chartered accountants in Bangalore. He has served as a member of the board of the International Federation of Accountants, New York, and also served as a member of its audit committee. He's an honorary member of the Certified Public Accountants of Australia and the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Australia and New Zealand, and has represented India at various global events. He's also held various important positions in the Confederation of Asian Pacific Accountants, the CAPA, and the South Asian Federation of Accountants, the SAFA. He served as an independent director on the board of Indian Overseas Bank, and as chairman of the audit committee of the bank, he has played a very important role in the turnaround of the bank. He's currently serving as an independent director of Axis Securities Limited, which is a 100% subsidiary of Axis Bank Limited. He served as a board member of the Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority and worked on several high-power committees constituted by the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, RBI, SEBI, the CAG, and IRDA. Raghu sir has presented many technical papers in various national and international conferences on issues of professional interest. A very, very warm welcome to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to request the panelists, all our esteemed panelists, to share their views. So you've seen the profession evolve over these years, much before we even joined the profession, and it would be a pleasure indeed to hear from you how you've seen it evolve. So I'll hand over to you all, sir, for opening remarks on what you think. Mr. T.S. Vishwanathan, sir. So you're on mute if you're speaking, sorry. So you're on mute if you're speaking, sir.
Sir, please unmute, sir.
I think he's
we are
not
unable
able
to hear you, and
I think Mitali, can you just give him a call and tell him?
Yeah, sir. I'll give him a call. Meanwhile, we can.
I'll request Mr. Chittale to share his views.
Okay, good afternoon. I think it's a nice occasion where people who have retired 20 years ago, 30 years ago from the institute as position holding presidents are asked to speak on subjects which is like yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Yesterday is always a history. Today is the reality, and tomorrow is the vision that we could bring forward. Now, since it's a panel discussion, I think I would take the minimum time to speak in the beginning. Since Mr. Vishwanath would, in a way, was unable to communicate, I am taking that lead first. See, when I think I was retired as a president, it was somewhere in 97, 98. The number of members at that time and today is vastly different. The number of students are different. That also brings its subject, its own complications and issues which are involved. So if you look at the institute at 3 stages, students, members, and the society at large. Broadly, that's how let me try and look at them. As far as the students are concerned, I think we have moved a lot. Now we are going to have examinations thrice in a year. There are times when the papers used to be for 3 hours. Now we are giving 15 minutes additionally to read the papers. Nothing to comment on that, but I think over a period of time, it should not so happen that we become a factory producing number of chartered accountants in a year. The quality is the benchmark, and all of us collectively need to maintain that the quality benchmark is absolutely essential. More people joining is a good step in the right direction. But as far as our standards of examination and the method of examination is concerned, I think all of us need to ensure that we maintain those standards properly. I think that is one thought which generally comes to mind when we look at students. Similarly, as far as the articleship is concerned, I think the articleship is an experience and it's a practical which is backed by theory of the examination. So as long as all of us who are working as chartered accountants and training article students keep that in mind, I think the problem will not be in education. But those of our members who do not do that job seriously do have to keep in mind that they are not doing justice to the profession when they don't train their article clerks properly. I think that's what I would say as far as the studentship is concerned. Coming to members, I think today the members of the institute are spread over in so many areas that audit has just become one of the area. if you look at our name, it is Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, but mainly we are known as auditors. Now, if we are mainly known as auditors, as CA firms, are the firms actually doing audits, or because of our expanding scope, are they doing many other areas which in a way supplement, complement, and sometimes distract audit also? I think that is one subject which is naturally affecting the profession today. And maybe in the course of our discussion, we can take up that subject properly, because for membership to continue to exist and to command the respect, because respect has always to be commanded, it is not to be demanded. And if the respect has to be commanded, then it has to come out of our own duties, our own commitment to the work that we are doing. And I think that is where the practices followed by chartered accountants, and when I say practices, I mean not only as a practicing chartered accountant, the work that is done, but any other thing which is done by a chartered accountant, society normally keeps on looking at you from different angles. So while as a profession, we have said that our area of work must increase, which has increased substantially, we need to relook at the subject to see whether this increase in subject load of a practicing CA, is it in the long-term interest of the profession, or is it creating some difficulties which we are not able to encounter as of today? I think I'm just leaving the thought for our own consideration. And thirdly, society at large, I think we all will continue to exist only when the society finds us useful. If the society does not find us useful, one day suddenly things can change dramatically. And therefore, to maintain that, what is our communication to the society at large? How do people look at it? Are we getting bad image only because of the handful of few who don't do things rightly? And if that course happens, what is our response to that situation? So I think when I say past, present, and future, I would better, instead of going historically, look at the areas of concern that affects the profession and see what is it that we need to do for the future in terms of areas where the shoe pinches us, and if the shoe pinches, we must know how to rectify that matter. And I think that's how I would like to see for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And I think we've got Mr. Vishwanath back. So
Yeah.
apologies for the issues, sir, and over back to you.
Can I be heard?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you see, I will not go too distant in the past, but broadly speaking, we were a controlled economy. And accordingly, the profession's scope had its limitations. And India was a highly taxed nation at that point in time. And in fact, with various other taxes, indirect and direct, it used to be more than 100%. So therefore, the attempt of professionals in those days was more how to plan the taxation in a way that it does not lead to evasion, but avoidance in a legal manner. And there was always that debate of what is avoidance and what is evasion. And the controlled economy by itself meant the profession, the regulatory authorities, they remained in their own cocoon. And the emphasis at that point in time, because a degree of concentration of audit work had come into play, and therefore there was more vibrant demand for dispersal of work, and accordingly the government, for the government audits, started on that pattern at that point in time. The Foreign Exchange Regulation Act prevented us or limited us in terms of becoming competitive internationally in any event. The profession itself was inward looking with its, I wouldn't say archaic at this point of time. At that point of time, it was relevant. The code of conduct was also limited in its own way. And the consultancy work was beginning, and there was this advent with basic consulting such as, and going beyond the accounting. Otherwise, accountancy and taxation was the primary focus of the profession at that point in time. The consultancy started emerging, and largely in terms of recruiting accounting professionals and things like that. Now, going forward to the present, I will take the proposition from 90s onwards till almost now. That's when the economy opened in 1990. That led to change in policy formulation of the government of India. And there was a gradual elimination of the license raj, which most of the members today would not have been even aware of. There, the attempt was how to get a particular industry setup within the framework and in terms of limitation of what shall I say, the size of that particular sector as envisaged by the Planning Commission and the government in those days. So that gradually went away, and that gave some breather and some opening up. And globalization had begun to take shape in a variety of ways. The accounting treatment, which we had many choices in the past, was now sought to be limited to alternative choices, and eventually between preferred and others. And now we are moving towards the precise one accounting language, as popularly it's called. So it also showed a period of setting up of regulators for the market, for the insurance and the like. And this brought in opening of new avenues for the profession in the insurance industry, in the market industry, I mean the SEBI-related work. And it also was the time in the late 90s, I would say even in the 80s, when the corporate scams started emerging. And the last man on the scene was always the auditor, and therefore he was made the butt of all the blame game. So that led to emergence of corporate governance. Although good governance is essential in any sort of thing, which was a given, but it was sought to be defined what could mean corporate governance. And everybody was running over each other to define what that corporate governance is. So that also led to drawing public attention to the profession and the professional erosion of credibility of the profession to an extent. And although the gap always existed between the public outlook of the profession, and also there was a unfortunate illusion of accounting exactitude in whatever the public perceived, without realizing the difference between this thing. And I think we were not great in terms of communicating that difference and getting people to come around. So then this led to overbearing and overarching oversight by the government, by the authorities, by the regulators. And very often now, as we can see lately, the blurring of the differences between what is negligence, what is gross negligence, what is a fraud, and now it amounts to criminal collusion, as we have seen in the past, which may or may not be, which is not necessarily right. Unless there is a collusion, you can't really attribute, because accounting standards, formulation, auditing standards have their own framework, and it's only a sort of assurance given the normal circumstances. However, the forensic knowledge, which now has become very important, and everybody is going for it. But I think going forward, one should have been able to smell the existence of malfeasance or fraud, which was not to be. So that blur became, and emergence of technology tools, whether it's blockchain, digital platforms, and so on and so forth. And that also led to weakness in our own establishment. And it began with NACAS, NFRA, which is also overbearing now. And we read every other day the ongoing controversies between NFRA and our own regulatory framework. So without some of the things that NFRA today comes up with, is without understanding the scenario in India. But at the same time, one cannot ignore the fact that India is part of the global network today. That, I would say, broadly sums up the current position. And of course, moving and scaling up the consultancy services in a manner that was never known, and also move towards interdisciplinary consultancy. Coming to the future, I would broadly, do I have the time? Yeah, coming to the future, I would like to see, there's no crystal ball, but nevertheless, from the prism of what could be, we could reimagine how trends is, having regard to the trends that are taking. So I'll broadly put it in 4, profession itself. Now, profession is part of the global economic scene. Now, today we can talk only in terms of India emerging third economy and so on and so forth. But the fact remains that India, when it grows to that size, it will be a very different scenario for the profession, because the size of the profession will grow larger. The need for well-performed audits will always remain a valuable exercise, and so on. And as Mr. Chitle pointed out, that accounting profession went beyond audit profession and beyond being auditors to many other areas. And that led to various consultancy for compliances and so on. So therefore, cross-border institutions in the future will be much more. Already you can see the signs of it. And in Indian outgoing investments are huge. Therefore, a sort of globalized profession will evolve over time. It may not take place overnight, but nevertheless, because each jurisdiction is zealously guarding its own turf. So going beyond, I would say technology and data. That's wealth of data today. So the important thing in the future would be data analytics and how to use that analysis for even audit or for other areas of consultancy, taxation, and so on. So the third, I would talk of reserve currency. See, accountant has to be in the future be far more knowledgeable in terms of the horizon that he has, understanding of geopolitics and geoeconomics, because ultimately that's what will shape. After all, professional exercises as the society's strength in a particular given scenario. So reserve currency, which is today dollar, people are talking of de-dollarization. People are talking of trade with the national currencies. At the same time, I just heard the incoming president of US talking about reducing the US debt through crypto settlement. So now that is the one which will have no underlying, but nevertheless, that's the talk. That will lead to another this thing. India is talking in terms of not crypto, but nevertheless, it talks of CBDC or central bank digital currency. And they will shape it in form of units. And there is also a talk of settlement through gold. And in case of India's CD, this digital currency, it will be backed with an underlying of the gold strength. So therefore, it has a better unit. And the future settlements could well take place through the exchange of units. And that would mean no conversion charges, which almost accounts for, I'm told, around anywhere between 5.5% to 6.5%, which is huge for large transactions. So therefore, that is an area where India, the professionals in India would need to know, have a wider knowledge of how the geoeconomics and geopolitics is taking shape and how the profession in India will become part of it. The fourth, I would imagine that there would come a time, because with so much of cross-border initiation of investments and so on, eventually there could be a global profession. There could be two sets, which is one of the questions I guess you have. So eventually, but that may take 2 decades or 3 decades, there has got to be a common understanding of what we want with specialism in something. So if somebody wants to be an international professional, obviously he must be familiar with the regulatory framework in those jurisdictions, which itself will over time come together, like whether it's what is that base erosion of profit sharing and so on. All this technology has led to a variety of situations by which every jurisdiction will want its share of taxation. So that's what is leading to all this. And I would imagine with technology, cyber security will become a very important feature. It may well be inbuilt in terms of the digital platforms, but nevertheless, there will always be somebody who's one up on the system and will work on. So therefore, that is where a chartered accountant or corporate profession will have to be concerned about. So there would be emergence of more global networks, even as we in the regulatory framework are still remaining in the past, and we need to move over to adapt the code of conduct to current terms, which I think will be a long way, because we'll have to give up a lot of our long-held beliefs and move and relearn some of the things that or unlearn some of the things that we learned and relearn new things. I mean, that's the way it will move forward. I also look at the possibility in taxation as we grow more international in our outlook, and as most jurisdictions do, a group concept of taxation. It may begin with public sector undertaking, because there's no point in each ministry concerned asking for supplementary grants for the loss-making public sector. If there was one holding company, there is no capital gain in the transfer of shares. So that could probably hold, and there could work out a group taxation. So therefore, they get the benefit of adjusting the losses of the group company into that. Of course, the minority interest will be separately dealt with. So that is another possibility in the taxation as I see it. And all this would mean, of course, more and more substance of the professions and so on. And I would only say professional autonomy will have to be always balanced with public interest. It's a question of what is public interest at a given point of time, which itself undergoes a change. What was public interest in India once upon a time not to let foreign investments in? Today, it's the other way around. We want more foreign investment. We want people to come and make money here so that the basic manufacture remains in India. I mean, that's the kind of thinking. So ethical values will always will be overarching, and our core values cannot be sort of compromised. And that's what brings the reliability of the profession in us. There may be bad eggs here and there, as Mr. Chitle pointed out. So I think ultimately it's the substance in our education, in our ability to be unbending in the face of adverse circumstances, because ultimately that's what is going to give us our place under the sun. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. A lot of food for thought on how we've moved from being a controlled economy to where we are today, and how you reimagine the future with technology going beyond audit, cryptocurrency and so on, and valuable thoughts on ethics and our core values. So thank you for that, sir. And I'd like to invite now Dr. Amarjeet Chopra to share his opening thoughts briefly, sir.
Thank you, Maitri, and thanks to the Institute. Now I'm meeting two of those presidents whom I really admire for various reasons. Vishwanath ji has been one of the torchbearers from the north. And so far as Chitle Sahab is concerned, he was the one who was moving out from the council when I entered the council. Actually, he was the one who installed me into the council. And of course, Raghu, with whom I have worked in the council for that matter. And thanks to you, Maitri, and thanks to the Institute for this opportunity. See, this past, present, future, kal, aaj aur kal, as they put it, it's very interesting to really go into the past, look at the present, and then try to see how the future really works out to be. I can only say a profession which started with a membership of 1,600 odd registered members. Today has a strength of more than 450,000 members for that matter. When I passed out in 1975, my membership number is 16,984, which meant that institute over a period of 26 years had produced only 15,000 chartered accountants, if you ask me, because we had started with 1,600 odd members otherwise. And today, every year, we are producing about 25 to 30,000 members. Rather, last attempt has seen more than 20,000 members being generated in one particular attempt, which is a very large number. And I think what Chitle Sahab said is very, very relevant. The number of students might have increased. There is no doubt about it, because there was a time when there was a fancy for the chartered accountants. And today also, to a large extent, there could be a fancy for the chartered accountancy course. But what is more important to be understood is whether we want to dilute the quality or we want to retain the quality. I think I will not say anything adverse about the quality today, but I think when we appeared, it was a very different scenario. When today the students are appearing, it is a very different scenario. We finished our intermediate with 6 papers in one go without any holiday in between. Today, there are 2 groups with holiday after each of the papers for that matter. I think Chitle Sahab said certain things. And then the kind of paper setting which has come in, and the kind of MCQs which have come in, and the kind of self-study which has come in, basically, I think removing costing and law papers, I don't know what can be the background for that. I think this is a major change which has happened in the profession. What has been the reason, I will not like to say, but I am very sure about it, that to an extent the quality stands diluted. Let me be very clear about it. And particularly the quality of the training stands diluted to a very, very large extent. And no profession, and particularly the chartered accountancy profession, will not be able to survive if you do not impart a good training to the students under any circumstances. I think we were trying to introduce at one particular point of time the e-diary concept, accepted by the council, not implemented. Maybe in future they might be able to implement it, because it is very essential to really look at what kind of training we are giving. In the past, there used to be a case where the articles will go around and try to find a good principle, basically. Today, the story is getting reversed, if you really ask me. But holding 3 examinations in 1 year, simply for the sake that the articles would be available to the membership at large, whether the membership is really prepared to train those articles, to me, that is very important. If you giving the number of seats is not important for the articles, maybe you can give basic number of seats for the training, but any additional seat should be linked with the work availability with the chartered accountant. I think, to me, the future of the student is very important. The future of the new member is going to be very important under all circumstances. When we qualified, we were looked upon as only accountants or tax advisors. Today, that's not the role. Let's be very clear about it. Today, I think the world has changed. What Vishwanath said, I think it holds so true. We lived in a controlled economy. When I was doing BCom, I think the highest tax rate, income tax rate in the slab was 97.5%. And if you are used to add the wealth tax, gift tax, state duty, etc., it used to work out more than 100%. When for the first time it came down to about 77%, there was such a euphoria that something new has actually happened in the Indian economy. And today you look at the tax structure, and still people feel that this tax is a bit high. And what has happened over a period of time, our dependence upon the taxation practice is now going down, because whatever has come by way of the faceless assessment, I think some kind of practices which are being followed cannot be practiced anymore under those circumstances. The things have changed, and the things will continue to change. There is no doubt about it. The face of the profession is changing. Vishwanath and Chitlesa both have brought out a very, very pertinent point about the membership, and particularly about the practice. I always say this institute was created for the purpose of accounting and auditing. Other services that we have added by way of the resolutions of the council. Let's be very clear about it. Now, whether those services have complemented, supplemented, or as the word was put in by Chitlesa, distracted the membership, I think that's very important to understand. If an auditor is dependent upon his profession, I think the quality of the profession would definitely improve, to my mind. If he becomes dependent upon certain other sources of income, the quality may suffer at any given point of time. So whether we want to allow the trading in the share market, or we want to allow some other kind of activities also to come in, I think the future will decide that particular part also. But to me, what is very important from the membership angle is, if this profession has to survive, basically, it is very important that we must improve the quality of the audit. Because what Chitlesa said, student, membership, and the society, the perception of the society will be very important at the end of the day, whatever we may think of. And this is one area we were created for the purpose of auditing, looking after the interest of the shareholders, looking after the interest of the various stakeholders. Our credibility, if at all, has gone down, it has gone down in this area more than anyone else. We may or may not agree. Self-patting has no meaning, basically. Let's be very clear about it. We have to accept certain facts that in the field of audit, our credibility has taken some kind of a beating with the kind of scams which are coming to light. And I think the kind of scams which will come to light in the times to come. If I look at the NCLT cases, and if I look at the role in certain cases, it may be good to say that in some cases it could be business failure, fine. But in a large number of cases, if it turns out to be accounting failure also, I think the auditing will have to take care of it. If not today, tomorrow. We had Nakas, we are now having Nafra. Now, so far as NAFRA is concerned, we cannot wish it away under any circumstances. There is no way that we'll be able to wish it away. NAFRA is here to stay. The only thing is that we must try to see that we complement and supplement each other's role. We cannot have the kind of, I think the maligning or the kind of newspaper reports which are coming, it is damaging the reputation of both the regulators. Let's be very clear about it. Somewhere or the other, if I issue an SQM, if I issue a standard on quality, either I defend it or I withdraw it. There cannot be two situations about that. What I am trying to say is when I look at the past was that it was after 99, that was after a period of 50 years of the existence of the institute, that we could make the accounting standards mandatory. Actually, it was near 2001 that we made the accounting standards mandatory, though we started pronouncing those standards in 78 for that matter. But today, if I look at it, we have Ind AS, we have standards for the local authorities, we have standards for the so many other organizations for that matter. We have the standards equivalent to IFRS. Now we have all auditing standards which are equivalent to international auditing standards for that matter. Though the NAFRA may say that some of these standards might require some kind of a revision, which if these require some kind of a revision, it's fine. But what I personally feel is that somewhere or the other, we must also look at the Indian conditions. We are globalizing, it's fine. But somewhere or the other, we need to look at the Indian conditions also. And if at all we have to Indianize some of these standards, we should do that also. I think to me, one of the important steps in future should be that also. We should start looking at the accounting standard. If people think that fair value is the only good concept in the accounting standard, I feel no. It may be even a fallacy in some kind of situation for that matter. In certain situations, it might be good, but in certain situations, it might be bad. In auditing standards also, some of the concept, today, we are all talking of this SS 600. I am very clear on one thing, if the central auditor requires the working papers to be shown, let it be shown to the central auditor. Instead of amending or instead of modifying SS 600, if you review the report only, if you revise the report format, I think the purpose can be served with that. It is how we look at the situation to come for that matter. And as Vishwanath put it, in India, we do not have the banks giving loans based upon the group concept. We do not have the taxation based upon the group concept for that matter. So if that is not there, probably talking of SS 600 in a different spirit today may not be worthwhile, but I don't mind it coming the way NAFRA wants to introduce it. What I'm trying to say is that the situation from 1949 traveling to, I think, mid-90s, particularly after liberalization, has totally changed. My fear is, my fears are twofold, basically. Number one, all auditing firms will require a tremendous amount of investment into the IT systems. Now, in Mufassil town, people are not willing to invest it. How do we really make sure that it happens? The institute should come forward, create a company under Section 8 and make some of the platforms available, make some of the tools available to the members, facilitating the auditing quality in those cases. And so far as artificial intelligence is concerned or blockchain is concerned or certain other things are concerned, this is going to be the order of the day. There is no doubt about it. In future, you may not be able to carry out the audits without that. But even artificial intelligence may have some kind of biases. So I was reading an article yesterday. So probably the members will have to be aware as to how to really temper that for that matter. So when I look at future, technology is going to be one of the very important angles. There is no doubt about it. And so far as the audit is concerned, but to me, more important is our role has changed. Our role has changed from the bookkeepers to the consultants, probably in the future to certain other new roles also we might be assuming. What is more important for us today is to understand one thing. We are living in a competitive world. Vishwanath used the word globalization. I am using the word we are living in a competitive world. And when we are living in a competitive world, we will not be able to block certain other professions from abroad to come into India, whether it is ACCA or CPA. I think people are already studying, our students are already studying those two courses for that matter and are qualifying. And if that comes in, we are facing the competition from there also. And in future, it is going to happen that way. So I think the institute has to be very, very open to certain new ideas now. I think we were a kind of an institute earlier. There are changed circumstances. We have to change for that. We will continue to open the chapters abroad. No harm in that. But I think for what purpose we are using those chapters, that's very important at the end of the day. My humble submission, or my rather suggestion, is that we do look at our new role. We cannot continue to be watchdogs. I think Vishwanath talked of forensic part. I'm very clear about it. Unless I start looking at the audit from a different perspective now, we may not be bloodhounds. Long time. We will have to become barking dogs. We will have to send early signals as to what is likely to happen in some of the companies. And we have to become a very, very important part, either as internal auditors or as statutory auditors or as forensic or whatever way we look at it, or as management auditors, as a part of the corporate governance. We have to become ears and eyes to the various stakeholders. We have to become ears and eyes to the management. And we have to throw out the indicators about everything at a much earlier stage. And I will like that the institute in future comes up with some kind of examination system where we are able to test a student based upon case studies, a case study in which we are able to test him in one question with regard to auditing, with regard to accounting, with regard to company law, with regard to taxation. I think that expression, that ability to actually see as to how there has to be a coordination in between the various acts and how these acts interact amongst each other, that's very, very important. I will like to stop here.
Thank you, sir. I think lots of very, very valid points, sir, that you made. As far as students are concerned, how the examination pattern has to change. As far as members are concerned, how our role is changing from accountant, tax advisor to much, much more. And as far as society is concerned, how governance and our responsibility towards upholding that governance has become so important. So thank you for that, sir. And I'd like to now invite Mr. Raghu to share his views.
Yeah, good evening, Maitreyi. I think it's a great honor for me to share the panel with esteemed past presidents. I've had the opportunity of working with Mr. T.S. Vishwanath when I was the chairman of the Bangalore branch, Mr. Mukund Chitale when I was in the regional council, and with Amarjit Chopra when I was in the central council. Having served the institute for so long, I think it's really nice to be together again and speak on a topic that is quite exciting, interesting. I would like to touch upon four, aspects to my, opening remarks. First is we're witnessing a digital transformation across the world. It's not limited to India. We see a transformation taking place across the world, the way business is being conducted. Today, the way e-commerce is growing, all of us should understand that the future is e-commerce. So when so much of change is happening in the way business is being conducted, yes, there'll be a disruption happening in our profession also, because the expectations of clients would increase. They would like to have real-time reporting. They would no longer want reporting to happen at the end of a particular point of time. They would want reporting to happen on a real-time basis. And what would really happen is that as chartered accountants, we need to have the knowledge of how to operate on a cloud-based environment, no longer server-based, cloud-based. And so you have access to information 24/7. Your client, yourself, and the finance team work on a collaborative mode so that you're able to provide the right kind of inputs to the management. Today, we've seen the success of the digital payment mechanisms in India, even in countries like US and Japan. Things like UPI have not taken off the way it has taken off in India. So when so many changes are taking place, when so much of new things happening, like remote working is now accepted. Thanks to COVID, flexi working in a city like Bombay is very common. So what is happening is that because of digital transformation, I think the expectations from the audit profession is changing. So the clients want you to do an online real-time audit. They want you to have the knowledge of cybersecurity. They want you to provide information online, on a 24/7 basis. They want you to use analytics to provide high quality inputs in helping them to take the business decision. So what I mean to say is that we are witnessing a big change in the way things are happening around us. And this digital transformation is impacted us and it will impact the next generation chartered accountants also. Secondly, I see a surge in advisory and consulting services. Mr. Vishwanath very rightly said that today consulting services constitute a major component of the revenue of CA firms. And the new generation CAs, since I'm interacting with a lot of people, I've been a president 2014. I find that their interest in audit and taxation is less. They would like to venture out into new areas, providing advisory and consulting services. And today ESG is becoming popular. Analytics, providing as consulting on analytics, cybersecurity, as Mr. Chitale talked about, forensic, valuation, M&A, IS audit. All this would be the future. So what would happen is chartered accountants should upskill themselves. No longer they can just be happy with what they've learned 10 years back, 20 years back. So you need to have the specialized knowledge of all these areas coming up, because today, if you look at M&A space itself, there's so many low-hanging fruits for all of us. So you need to specialize in these areas, and we find that there's a surge in advisory and consulting services for the profession. Number three is there's a need to build next generation firms. I think today the expectation of the regulators have changed. Mr. Amarjit Chopra very rightly said he was one of the pioneers in implementing IFRS in India. When we implemented IFRS in India, we had a big challenge. We had to convince the regulators. Regulators were asking us why we need to, align with, IFRS. We had to talk to them, convince them. There were many meetings that was conducted. And I still remember that we were able to convince them. And today, maybe about 5 differences, our entire Ind AS is aligned to international financial reporting standards. And as a result of which, we find the financial statements are today IFRS compliant, more or less IFRS compliant. So there's a need for us to understand what is expected globally from the investors around the world, from the regulators around the world, from the regulators in India, investors in India, and we need to change accordingly. So there's a need for our firms, our CA firms in India. Today, we have a whole lot of firms of proprietors, 2 partners, 3 partners, 5 partners, who need to embrace technology. They need to constantly invest in technology, because technology is something very critical. If you need to offer services to clients around the world, you need to have a strong technology backbone. And there's a need for you to engage with IT professionals. You need to engage with IT companies and try to see how best your firm can leverage on the latest technology available, the latest software that are available, because today the entire delivery is going, digital. Today, the income tax return filing, the GST return filing, the TDS return filing, everything is so automated. And even the government departments have embraced technology in a big way in India. And today, assessments are coming in a period of 24 hours. So when that is the case, we as chartered accountants, we as professionals should embrace technology and ensure that we are able to adopt the new edge technologies. Today, quantum computing is becoming the in thing. Quantum computing is something where the computers work 10 times the speed as they work today. So upskilling is something very important, so that when we build a next generation firm, you need to have the right kind of resources. If you do not have the resources, you need to take in some young partners who have the capability to deliver new services, or the current partner should upskill them. That's very important. And one thing is important is that if I'm sitting in Bangalore, I should look beyond Bangalore. There's a need for me to look at global clients. I need to be aware of global delivery, global opportunities. So I should set my eyes beyond Bangalore. And that is what is the need of the hour. Today, what is happening is that a lot of CAs are exporting services to various other countries. And I feel this trend would continue. And any new generation CA firm should look at building delivery models to cater to clients around the globe. So the era of specialized has already come. Last 2 decades, we have been seeing how information systems audit, how forensic, how valuation, how insolvency is playing a big change, the way chartered accountants are offering their services. And those chartered accountants who have realized this, who have embraced specialization, have been immensely benefited. So I personally believe that the next generation CAs should either think of specialization, because specialization is something which is very common in the medical profession, but in the CA profession, last 2 decades, we are slowly seeing the emergence of chartered accountancy firms, chartered accountants who specialize either in forensic or IS audit or valuation or any of these, insolvency. So that is something that we need to accept. Number 3, which I would like to touch upon, is global opportunity. There are plenty of opportunities. When I qualified in the year 1990, the opportunity was restricted to either a job in India or maybe get into practice. But today, it's very easy for chartered accountants to decide whether they want to practice in Singapore, whether they want to work in Singapore, whether they want to go to UAE, whether you go to the UAE, whether it's Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Jeddah, Kuwait, Bahrain, Dubai, a lot of opportunities for our CAs, 3 times the package what you can get in India. Australia is another exciting place. We find a lot of CAs, offering their services in the banking and pension sector. UK is another exciting place. A lot of CAs are going to UK because the banking sector is absorbing, the financial services sector absorbing a lot of CAs. USA is something where, still there's a lot of interest. Many people have to, since we don't have a reciprocity with the American Institute of Certified Public Accountant, they have to take up the CPA program offered by the American Institute and then take up a job there. But as far as UK is concerned, Australia is concerned, I think our MRAs are working very well. Many Indian chartered accountants are taking up the respective, passing the respective qualification because they're exemption in many, many subjects. So today, when you go around the world, you see a lot of Indian CAs, more than 30 to 40,000 CAs are offering their services. So this would continue. And I find more and more young CAs are looking at global opportunity, and we should encourage that. So what I mean to say is that there's a need for us to look at, number 1, digital transformation that is taking place. Number 2, surge in advisory and consulting services. Number 3, the need to build the next generation CA firm. And number 4, look beyond India. Look at opportunities beyond India is what I would like to say. So finally, what I would like to say is the way forward for the profession is exciting. And it's for us to see that how best we are able to leverage on what is happening around the world. Thank you, Maitri.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Way forward for the profession is bright. I like that statement. I'll begin, with a question that most of you have addressed in your opening statement. Chitle sir spoke about how audit is our backbone, and Amarjit sir spoke about how the role has been changing. Vishwanath sir also spoke about how things have evolved over the years, and Raghu sir, you spoke about ESG and several others. So there's a lot of public pressures, as you know, stakeholder expectation, things like that. ESG is getting a lot of importance. There are sustainability standards now that have come out, similar to our accounting standards, things like that. And how, as a profession, how do we gear up for this new wave, where as professionals we are expected to contribute to a lot of non-core areas that we've not been trained on, but somehow that always find their way into our corner. And how do we gear up for that? And what do you think is the core role of an accountant? Just audit, or is it accounting, audit, several other allied services? What is it? I'll hand over to any of you who want to begin this discussion. Amarjit sir, you're muted if you're speaking, sir.
It's a very interesting question that you have raised. You see, sitting over in the council, one has been feeling that whenever the word audit comes in, we always feel that it is our domain. Whether we require the help of certain other sectors or not, we forget at that time. If somebody says that transmission loss audit is to be done, we feel that chartered accountants are actually competent to do it. Upskilling, what the word which has been used by Raghu time and again, is very, very important. If ESG audit is to be conducted, we must first understand what environment, sustainability, governance actually means, and what can be the impact of all of these 3 on the corporate and of course on the society at large. We just forget that, you see, we continue to say that a company is doing very well, looking at the profitability of the company. Now that company might be doing the biggest harm to the society at large by carbon emissions or by giving out some pollutants or something of that sort. We have never bothered about it so far. Now, of course, the ESG has come into play. The boards never used to feel about it, very frankly, if you ask me. They also were looking at the numbers only. No, as the funds have come in, and funds say that we will give you the funds only if you are environmental friendly or sustainability friendly. That is where the change is coming in. Now, there are certain institutes. I know at least there is one institute in where Mr. Panigrahi is actually training the people on this ESG audits also and ESG concept also. We really must, rather than only developing the standards, you may develop the standards, but how those standards are to be implemented in the corporate world, that itself is a challenge. And based upon those standards, how we want to audit that is going to be a bigger challenge. Because there could be certain things which would be only qualitative in nature, which it will be very difficult to certify them. Very frankly, there can be only an expression of an opinion. Unless you can actually verify the figures, there will be only a sort of a expression of an opinion. To what extent this opinion will be good or bad, I don't want to get into that. Very frankly, there used to be additional requirements in the disclosure of Schedule 6 earlier, where they used to ask certain questions with regard to how much consumption of electricity or power has gone down, etc., etc. Now, we used to even look at those figures at that particular point of time. I may not say that we used to certify, but we used to definitely look at those figures. My only submission is, before we get into any area, we must have proper training with regard to that area, or we must have the capability or the, I think, intention to say no. If I cannot say no to certain things which I'm unable to do, I think I will land myself and the profession into the problem. I'm very clear on that. If I can do something, I will definitely accept it. If I cannot do something, I will definitely reject it, because there is no point in accepting a job simply for the sake of certain fee, not doing a good job, because ultimately quality will be the hallmark of everything. Merely holding of the seminars on ESG is not going to help. I think it is the training in the classrooms which is going to help the members so far as the ESG audit is concerned. That's the way I look at it.
Just to add to what Mr. Chopra said, I think when we talk about ESG, I think that's emerging very fast, and there's a need for us to work with other co-professionals also, professionals in the environment space, professionals in the sustainability space, because there's something that we ourselves as chartered accountants may not be able to do. And if you've seen successful ESG implementations, CFs have collaborated with other professionals and they're able to come out with better quality reporting.
I can tell you, Maitri, I sit on a particular board without naming, and the kind of report which I have seen, I think one just cannot even take it, and one has expressed the dissatisfaction. You just want that kind of a report, because that report I may be able to generate sitting over in the home. What is more important is whether that report is worth, and whether it is worth being used by someone at the end of the day, whether it will communicate something to the reader of the report or not. I think that's extremely important.
I think at a macro level, first of all, our profession needs to identify what is non-core. And if it is non-core competency, then it cannot be competency. If we are strict, I mean, it's an oxymoron of sorts. So therefore, the right way to go about is identify what falls out of our existing skills. In those areas we go into, identify. And of course, we will not be ethical if we say we mean all things to all people, on all issues, as Mr. Chopra said. So I think that's the way to go forward. And unless you have a developed knowledge, both organic and otherwise, there's no point getting into an area, because consultancy, once you do, you always get in the domain expert, and then you try to put together. So an act of, putting together is what has been on in the consultancy, which goes into the non-core area, which is not our core, but somebody else's core. In fact, you have one of the questions you're also asking, how to collaborate with other professions. We'll come to that. So I think most important is to know very clearly, we cannot mean all things to all the people. And our discussion is largely focusing on profession and how the professions must move forward. I think we have to see in a broader ambit of the global scene and how the geopolitics and economics is working, how India fits into it, and how the Indian professional or profession itself acts in tandem with the national objectives. So these are all a couple of things. One can easily say we can go to XYZ country, but that country may not want you. Or today, the bigger problem that is happening is with India's growing strength, and I can see in the next 20, 30 years, even if we take conservative projection, it will not be too long before professionals from the developed world want to come to India and compete. Just as you may want to go there on the strength of your quality service, but at a lower cost than they are used to. In fact, when I was president, and Mr. Chitle will bear me out, we were together in the English Institute, and he was saying, look, the point is it's a club out here, and we can't open up. So I mentioned, Mr. Chitle will bear me out, if this is a club for you, so is it the other way around. We don't consider it a club. We still consider it as a profession. So you think our membership will be quiet on it. So therefore, at the end of the day, our competence must be established. Otherwise, we are unethical saying, okay, we can do anything, because anything that comes in. Most of the government consulting service today, in fact, I have seen even some of the top consulting companies, in fact, some of the ministers remarked to me, I mean, there's nothing in it. Because as Mr. Chopra says, you can sit in your office and Google and do the search and make your reports. That's not what is wanted. Ultimately, it should be implementable and it should be capable of delivering what it is expected to be.
Just a quick addition. Just a quick addition. See, as far as the institute is concerned, the role of the institute in these areas is enabler. And therefore, if there are new areas which are coming up, the institute creates study materials, standards, etc., which would enable a member to do the practice. As far as practicing members are concerned, I think it is their call to decide whether they want to do it or not. Naturally, anybody who is in the profession for earning name and money is going to say, look, we will do it. And the work starts. Having started the work, then the reports are delivered. I think the problem arises that the CMCA firm wants to do statutory audit of financial statements where the report is to be relied upon by the people for financial correctness, trueness, fairness, etc. Whereas there are many other areas which are now expanding, called consulting, but working under the banner of chartered accountant. Now, these are the areas which in the long term are going to affect the reputation of the profession if those are not done properly. I think the real issue to me is that position. In order to expand our scope of work as collectively for all of us as chartered accountants practicing in India, we want the scope to be unlimited. But that scope to be unlimited keeps on taking us to areas of work where our report is not necessarily of the same type as we do on financial statements. And if something goes wrong at one end, all other ends are considered to be wrong. Now, how does the profession take care of this dichotomy is, I think, what we need to really look at.
No, I think to address this issue which Mr. Chitle has raised, is the profession itself must apply itself as to say what are barred in the name of consultancy by us, instead of leaving the whole scope wide open. And it must be in concert with other professions and other jurisdictions. And it can work around. So rather than leaving it to individual member, because then just as they have said in the corporate law now, if you're a statutory auditor, you can't do some other things. But there is no justification for that person, except for the kind of relatable interest. Other than that, if you are sticking to your core in terms of the professional values, there's no reason why you can't do. So long as you can very clearly iterate the difference between what you have to do as an auditor and what you are supposedly doing. It can't be as a tax expert, you are also telling them how to do it and also accepting the same as part of the audit. That cannot be done. So that is where it becomes difficult. That's why the regulators step in and bar this. So why can't we do it ourselves as an institute? Even accounting standards, auditing standards, it has evolved because we never wanted it to be outside. Many of us tried in the past how to make it independent, and the role of the council being limited either to accept that or to send it back without any right to modify. So once that kind of demarcation is arrived at, things could have been very different. It wouldn't have given rise to many of the things that has come up. Today, in the name of NFRA, what was meant for only professional standards originally, now it has gone on beyond a point for listed companies and virtually good part. So I see in the future, eventually they'll come together and there would be a sort of a Chinese wall between this class and that class. And at the same time, the core framework and structure will be equally applicable for both. For example, if they keep coming with the SA 600 and things like that, there are many large unlisted things with a lot of subsidiaries. And if you are wanting overseen where you have more than majority of subsidiaries, then it will become very difficult unless it is commensurate with the investment that the audit firm has to make, the principal audit firm has to make. And that can be, so nobody talks about the commensurate. If you want the quality, you need to employ the best in the field. And for best in the field, there is a cost. So that fee part, NFRA, we must impress. Everything is possible. But when you bring out some mandate, then also make sure that it is within the possibility in the Indian scenario, which is what Mr. Chopra also alluded to.
Thank you, sir. Yes.
Matri, I just wanted to say, you see, what Vishwanath said is absolutely fine. That institute must decide what is our core competence, what is not our core competence. Of course, I must say one thing, that institute has already allowed you to get into multidisciplinary companies for that matter. Now, if you want to get into that, you get into that. Nobody stops you to do that. But in multidisciplinary partnerships or companies, whether you will be able to undertake the assurance function, that is quite doubtful. That's the only concern. My humble submission would be that one can actually take up, so far as the consulting assignments are concerned, under the MDP, if these are your non-core areas also. But if it is going to be an assurance function, it has to be undertaken under the chartered accountancy firm only. There you should be able to undertake only when you are actually competent in that area. That's very, very important. So far as multidisciplinary firms are concerned, you keep on doing whatever you want to take, because you can have any kind of people therein. There is no doubt about it. But so far as your assurance function is concerned, to me, what is bothering me is my assurance function and my credibility linked with that. I think I am very concerned with it today. The kind of reports which are being generated in for different companies, for that matter. And of course, what Vishwanath said, it is quite unfortunate. Now, I think NAFRA has gone a step ahead and SEBI has gone a step ahead only 2 or 3 days back, where a person has been held guilty by NAFRA. SEBI has held that that person cannot occupy the position of CEO in another company. Can you imagine? It has just happened 2 days back. SEBI has come out with an order that since he has been held guilty by NAFRA, he does not get into the fit and proper case, and he cannot hold that position. And he's a chartered accountant, let's be very clear, retired from one of the bigger firms for that matter, and having surrendered his COP. Now, this is something which is happening new in the society, and that is where I say that we have moved from a virtually no regulation to over-regulation now.
No, but on the point, Ms. Chopra has said, why can't we corporatize the practices? Why should it be limited to partnership firms? And as far as the individual responsibility is concerned, you can leave it to the director concerned who signs. Which I took it up 35, 40 years ago, but of course, I was
I
way
still
ahead of
remember
my
that,
time.
sir. I still
Well,
remember.
in US, they have started doing it. In other countries, they are doing it.
We have come to
That will
LLP.
be-
I think we'll come
That
to
will
the
be
corporate
better
also.
monitored than as an LLP or a partnership. There's nothing
Yeah.
wrong.
We have already come to LLP, we'll come to the corporate also, sir, in the times to come. The times are changing, there's no doubt about it.
Sir, on that note of regulators and all the over regulation that you just spoke of, you've all participated in several regulatory authorities and been instrumental in formulating these regulations. And as chartered accountants, many of us are so busy with our auditing or accounting practices that we never think that we may have an opportunity to influence the regulation. So your note of advice to the participants in today's session is that how they might use their skills and try and influence the regulation of the country and bring us to a better place, because we as a professional fraternity, I'm sure, have the influence and have the ability to contribute better. So your opinions on that, sir?
No, I think as far as this is concerned, whoever has had the opportunity of sitting on a regulator's advisory committee or the board has been trying to influence, but he's left into a hopeless minority, because if it doesn't suit the overall corporate world, at times it doesn't go through, especially in related to. I have been for 18 years on the IRDA, and the concept of, in fact, the joint audit was brought in when everybody came against that on the ground that it doesn't happen abroad. I said, we can be on our own. Why should we wait for what happens abroad? So therefore, this was a way to prepare more audit firms to get into it. Earlier, the argument was there are very few who are exposed to insurance. That is why in the first we said, so there are problems, but where the vested interest develops, which is unseen and unstated, that's where the problem is. But I think if we keep at it, eventually it will come from.
I fully subscribe to what Vishwanath ji has said, that sitting over in some of the other committees, very frankly, one has been propagating this concept of joint audit. Now, what happens is that you get into minority, because those committees have people from industry. Those people have some from the bigger firms, some from the other regulators also, who have their own vested interests, basically. No, industry will not like a joint audit. Let's be very clear about it. One has been arguing very clearly and very consistently that in the government sector, every audit is under a joint audit. Look at ONGC, look at Indian Oil, look at Engineers India. Wherever you go, it is all under the joint audit. And joint audit is not a bad concept under any circumstances. But some of the professors, some of the regulators, some of the even lawyers for that matter, keep on opposing it on one ground or the other for no reason or rhyme. But I can tell you, for the last 10 years or more than 10 years, one has been actually taking it up at every forum. And it saw a bit of a success in one particular year, but somehow or the other it didn't materialize at the right level at that particular point of time. But maybe, as Vishwanath ji says, that whatever starts, it may ultimately have its end also.
The NFRA is a good example.
Yeah. Yeah.
Titile, sir, anything to add to that?
Yeah. See, I think your question was on helping members or, promoting members to be a part of advising regulators, etc. Now, there are two things which happen. A regulation normally, as a chartered accountant, is taken as for granted, because in individual practice or work, one has to implement the regulation. So by habit, people become more compliance oriented, and which is quite good. At the same time, those of us who get the opportunity must have the ability to communicate with logic as to why there is a need for a change. I think that's what anybody can do that, whether sitting in committee or outside committee. But possibly what we find is, in all important public communications, generally, the tone is always to be in compliance with what is existing, rather than saying either oppose or propose. There is no midway communication. See, either one is a complete subservient to the situation or one is complete opponent to the situation. I think the regulations have to strike a balance between the two. And that's what many of us need to learn to communicate. And we have to start writing in the newspapers, other places as to what is required. And if we say what is required, why it is required. I think that's where we seem to be not really doing as much as all of us should do that. Let's see who will do that and when will you do that.
Chitale sir, the point you're making is, we need to learn to communicate, and we need to learn
Absolutely.
to communicate to a larger forum.
Effectively. Learn to
And,
communicate effectively.
Effect,
Yes.
yeah, that's correct.
Yes. And Raghu sir, you spoke of
And in terms of the current context, where it would be an acceptable communication. That's where the problem is really.
Yeah.
absolutely. And I was just saying, Raghu sir, you spoke of upskilling and things like that. So what is the importance of this communication, even as far as it comes to ethical values, Vishwanath sir? You just spoke of how letting people know that this is not your core competence is part of our ethics. So, communication as far as projecting our image to society, communication as far as projecting, what is ethical, what is not, and communication again in public forums. How important is it, and how can we upskill our fraternity to be able to do this better?
Yeah, I think the Institute has been doing a phenomenal job. When we aligned with IFRS implementation happened, we came out with a certification course on IFRS. When international taxation became maybe 15 years back, 20 years back, when transfer pricing was something new, we launched a certification courses on international taxation. Today, we have a certification course on valuation, insolvency. So what I mean to say is that Institute has also understood that there's a need for our members to specialize if you need to survive. Because if a client comes to you and he wants you to advise him on an M&A transaction, you need to know how you could guide him on the valuation. You need to also guide him as to how he should structure his taxes. So there's a need for you to have additional knowledge than what you possess. So that is when upskilling would happen. And let me tell you very rightly, as Mr. Amarjit Chopra said, that everyone can't do everything. I cannot be an insolvency professional. I can't be a forensic professional. So you need to have a strategy within the firm and then decide how you go about expanding your practice and have partners who are specializing in different areas of practice, or else it will not be possible for you to do forensic one day, do insolvency the next day, and then the third day you do valuation. It's not possible. You need to have clear verticals within the firm, have partners identified for one or two areas. They need to have specialized skill sets. That is when we'll be able to offer high quality services, what I personally feel. And today we find that upskilling is happening. Many young professionals have understood that without upskilling, they'll not be able to survive. And this should increase, and I feel it's happening. That's the positive thing which I see.
Upskilling is also important from two more angles, basically. You see, firstly, I like to add to what Raghu said. He talked of upskilling in certain areas. I think the kind of work that the Institute did in upskilling with regard to GST, I have not seen in my life any other institute doing it. Let's be very clear about it. We may or may not be getting the credit for it, but that's a matter of fact. We have not only trained our members, we have trained even all the government officials for that, rightly or wrongly. I am not on that point. But the fact is that the Institute undertook to actually upskill the government officials in that, whatever the GST department people had. So that has been a phenomenal work that has been done in that particular area. The other thing that one will like to say is that the youngster today is very, very clear about it. And you look at it now in the Companies Act, if the provision has come in that the audit trail is to be tested, that it existed throughout the year. Unless you have upskilled yourself, it will be very difficult. Rather, in some of the cases last year, because that was the first year, most of the auditors found it difficult as to how to go about it. And unless we do it, unless we upskill ourselves, or unless we have the expertise from an outside party with regard to testing of the same, it will not be possible. I think in the future, it will be it will be of utmost importance that if I do not have the in-house ability, I will have to hire out that facility from somebody. There is no doubt about it. And then document it properly, that whom did I hire and what was his opinion in regard thereto. Because the complications which are coming in, the kind of changes which are coming in, every firm, or rather in a firm also, all the partners may not be able to take it up even, and you will have to hire out those. So you will have to really hire the outside experts for that. This is going to be very, very important in the times to come. There's no, and I think that is what is going to be the future. So either your services will be taken by somebody, or you will be taking up someone's services for that matter.
Matre, you also talked about communication with regulators. I think when we talk about communication with regulators, all of us have worked with the regulator, whether it's RBI, SEBI, IRDA, Ministry of Finance, and our experience has been quite positive. On many occasions, they have valued the expertise of the institute. They have valued the expertise of our members. We have a large membership. They've understood the standard setting process. They know how we go about getting the views from the stakeholders, how we form expert groups, how we take them into confidence. And this is something I think even with NAFRA, with Mr. Amarjit Chopra said today, currently, there's a standoff between the institute and NAFRA. I think we need to communicate to them as to what exactly our profession has played over the last 75 years, what exactly, how we are going about in setting the standards. I think more communication is required with the regulators, and until and unless we need to work with them, until and unless the other side understands what exactly we have done for the last so many decades, I think it would be difficult. I fully agree with you that you need to communicate effectively, not only with other stakeholders, especially the regulator. We need to be very effective in our communication.
And one part where I think the communication will be very important, and I will definitely like to have the comments of Chitle Sahab and Vishwanath on that. We are being regulated by every regulator now. We can be held guilty by RBI for the same. We can be held guilty by SEBI. We can be held guilty by ICI. We can be held guilty by NAFRA for that matter. I think this is getting too much now. After all, there has to be one regulator for one deficiency. If I have gone bad, say, if as a bank auditor I have not performed well, then the bank or the RBI can complain it to the institute rather than proceeding on their own. And before even being established that I have actually committed a guilt, they will say that we actually blacklist you for another 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. I think that is not desirable. And similarly can be the case of SEBI or any other matter. So I personally feel it is very important that the institute must take it up with the various regulators, that if at all you have a grievance against somebody, please come to us rather than trying to regulate the profession yourself, and rather 4 or 5 regulators getting into that at one point of time.
No, I concur with what Mr. Chopra says. I think I would like to leave a thought on the table. You see, for all the amendments that are taking place in the various enactments, which are archaic, which are being done away with, there is a young group called Vidhi, which actually drafts the regulations, which drafts the law. Then it goes to the legislative department of the Ministry of Law. So that way you can put your thoughts rather than waiting to interpret somebody else and then say this is not in order. So here the institute, that was the context when we talked of research and all that, but it turned out to be something else. So we have enough investments, have a group of people who will do all this, whether it is tax law, corporate law, GST law. For example, threshold of GST. Initially, it started with audit compulsion. Now it is no longer there. But then an alternative work institute must come up, how to ensure compliance consultancy, because that's where it will be. And going forward, I would also like to say, as the Indian economic size grows, there may be audit by exception, which means the threshold of audits will go up. And in that scenario, the digital platforms itself may have audit process inbuilt. So therefore, the very upper level corporates would be subject to this. And we can find an area of consultancy, how to ensure that audit process is working well or otherwise. So I think a research team of the institute have young minds, brightest minds. Let's pay, I mean, as a supplement. And then government today buys, in fact, Vidhi is fully supported by the government of India. They are asking them to make it. So if we can do that for corporate law, the points that we are raising individually, we can put that in ours. Then let them come back and say why that is not conducive in the Indian context or whatever. Then we can have our arguments why we are doing what. So that would be the more positive way and proactive manner in which we can bring about legislative changes. We give them the law. In fact,
Just
that's
an
the
addition-
idea when research team was built.
Just an additional thought, I think,
Yeah.
since Chopra ji mentioned something, I think two things. One has to deal with it as an individual or as a particular incident, and one has to also look at it in a structural manner. I think as an individual incident, I totally agree that it's one action, there can be only one reaction to that. Or one problem, there can be only one regulator who should deal with that. I think conceptually that's correct. But the more important point is something different. See, if you look at all last 25, 30 years, whenever there has been a corporate failure, the general hue and cry is that it is the auditors who have failed. It is the audit standards who have failed. It is the accounting standards who have failed. By and large, we are not being able to decide how to deal with a failure. Meaning thereby, if Satyam happens, it is taken as X or Y or Z has failed. We never tried to propagate as to was it a failure of an accounting standard or an auditing standard, or was it a failure of a particular individual, combination of individual or firms or the management which really led to the defeat of corporate governance. Take all the subsequent problems at any point of time when there's a difficulty, the general reaction, which is normally a knee-jerk reaction, is amend the law, make something more. After ILFS, you get 20 more clauses into the CARO saying that A, B, C, D, E, F, G, whatever it is. After the last thing comes in amendment to SA 600. Now, that is where I think all of us collectively need to know that are we trying to solve a problem only by correcting standards when the standards themselves as they stand might be sufficient and good enough. And I think that is what I mean by we are not understood the art of dealing with failure. And I think that is where the institute has to be more vocal, more clear in terms of saying, if there is a corporate failure or if there is a something which incident takes place, is it an individual, a group of individuals or an organization which has failed, or is it a failure of the basic accounting or auditing standard? If it is a failure of the basic accounting and auditing standard, let's accept that openly and let's amend that. But I think that thought process, that clarity or that research somehow doesn't come out. And therefore, collectively, all of us keep suffering by getting an amendment every time there is a major economic failure.
I think I would add yours truly and Mr. Chitle or witness to that. When Harshad Mehta happened, I mean, there was more attempt how to frustrate the disciplinary process of the institute. With the result, I mean, either the Reserve Bank concerned person will not turn up or he would have been transferred and so on. And instead, the governor would always chase me down. And I told him, sir, you are not doing your part of the job. So, these are the things that happens. So if the institute is wanting to make it say, then we must effectively raise the issue rather than, as somebody said, subservient, rather than being supplicant to whatever is being handed down. And there either some vested interest of the concerned person is there, or it takes Satyam is a good example. The auditor comes last, so therefore he is of course culpable. But what happened to the banks which issued all the confirmation certificates of the balances which were the what? What happens to the IT related, which was every day remonitored by the management, and next morning auditor was given that? Now you can say he should have seen what was the previous year. I mean, so if you're going by your normal standards, you wouldn't suspect that sort of a thing. And that's where I think institute should have been a little more, rather than meekly accepting and blaming ourselves, and also going hammer on tongs on our own.
Thank you, sir. you spoke of, the last man standing being the auditor, and Chitle Saab also spoke about Satyam, where, individuals may have perhaps done certain things. We had a comment earlier also about the few black sheep. And, things like ethical dilemmas are something that as chartered accountants, we all face at some point in time in our career. And it's when we are unable to resolve these ethical dilemmas, correctly, that instances such as this come up. So with your rich experience in this field, and you have the years now of a lot of participants in today's session, I'd like to hear your views on when we are faced with ethical dilemmas. What is the right thing to do? How should we think? What have been some of your experiences in that field that can help save the reputation of our entire profession?
I think as far as that is concerned, first of all, we must know what in a given situation, what we are faced with, what is the ethical proposition in that context. If we are clear about that, we must remain unbending regardless of what is the outcome. Either somebody will say you're no longer the auditor, or there would be other kinds of pressure. But if you remain unbending, initially there would be unpleasantness, but eventually it goes through. We have had experiences on both counts. We were quite happy to leave something, and there were promoters who had wanted you back because we said that's what we want to hear. At least we know what's happening in our corporates. So therefore, first of all, we should be clear what is the ethical positioning in a given circumstance. And on basic issues, there cannot be any compromise, or one must be unbending. There are, if materiality or other matters can be reasonably convincing, one can overcome. So it's an individual judgment in a given situation, and the human input, which will be regardless of what technology brings about, it is ultimately going to be the judgment of the individual on the scene. So that's how I think you should comprehend. And if you are, eventually you will succeed if you stay the course.
I fully subscribe to what Vishwanath ji has said. Very frankly, it is all individual's own perception about himself, and I think his own conviction. I personally feel that if you feel that you are right, you must take a stand. I think in many audits, it does happen that you have to take a stand, and the management will ultimately come around. So at times, it is a war of attrition, if you really ask me. Who bends first when you are auditing something? And there are times when the management then comes around, okay, we do agree with you. But if the management is not willing to agree, you have two choices, one to continue and one to qualify. I think that's up to you. What do you want to do? But yes, you can't do one thing that a subject matter of qualification is put into a matter of emphasis. That shouldn't happen. And that is where the reputation of the profession goes. And I think on one or two matters, such matters, RAFRA has come down very heavily on a few of the members. So what is important ultimately is your own conviction about your own values, whether you value it or you don't value it. So if you think that you are right, you must stick to it. And you shouldn't mind saying that, okay, if it's not possible, it's not possible at the end of the day. And I can't do it. So if you are willing to compromise, then anybody is willing to compromise. So I think it is your own inner conscience which is more important than anything else. And you are answerable to yourself than to anyone else. I think we must be very clear in our mind that we are not answerable to anyone else. We are more answerable to ourselves first. And if I can have a comfortable sleep in the night, that I have done my job right, it's fine.
I will like to add a situation. I recall some time back when I used to be at the helm. There was the regulator which found most auditors agreeing with him. There was one auditor who qualified otherwise, and they kept blaming he doesn't know the job. Eventually, that one auditor was proved right. When in one of the audit committees, I was asked, look, this, I said, look, ultimately, he's the one who's right. So therefore, ethical positioning was different at different times. So some people went along, some people. The one who didn't go along with firm conviction, he was proved right. And that was a lesson to the well-known regulator in the country.
And
talking about ethical
dilemmas, we had the opportunity of, I was also along with Mr. Chopra when we went for the, various when we're talking about Satyam, ethical dilemmas could be by the practicing professionals, that is, the members who are attested, and also members who are working with the company. A dilemma could happen for both these categories of members. Here, I would agree with what Vishnath Saab and Chopra Saab said. I think we should be firm in our view and we should tell the management that this is not done and we should be clear that we should put our foot down. But when it comes to employees who are working with the management and they're being paid a very fat salary and they're asked to sign on the dotted line, here I think members of our profession should also be, look at this dilemma when they find that something is not going in the right way. I think they should put their foot down, and to the extent if they feel that something is not going their way, they should even think of resigning from their job, is what I personally feel. But finally, it's a call that each individual has to take when he faces an ethical dilemma, whether he would like to withstand the dilemma and try to fight it out, or whether he wants to put his foot down and say, sorry, it's not possible. I think this dilemma will be for both practicing members and chartered accountants who are working. So
This is something which I have been writing on many forums in my articles, that why only auditor? Why not CFOs?
Yeah.
Why not the audit committee chairman for that matter, who is in the knowledge of certain things? I think CFO and company secretaries are also, as when it comes to related party transactions, who knows who is the related party? It is the company secretary who knows that who is the related party. And if I rely on his certification who is the related party, ultimately he should be also held accountable. Similarly, the CFO position for that matter. Who is the preparer of the financial statements? I write in my report at the top of it that it is the management's responsibility to prepare the account. That's not my responsibility. Now, if I am being presented by an absolutely wrong facts, you only hold the person accountable who is looking at it and who has prepared it. You are not willing to hold him accountable. I think that ethical dilemma should be as much with them and as much with the directors also, the CA directors who sit on certain board, as it is with the auditors.
It could be also non-CA directors.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why only CA?
Absolutely. No, I'm because we are talking about the profession.
No,
so that's why I
understand.
said yes.
I said the institute must raise this.
Yeah.
Can I add something on this? I think, see, each one of us working in different areas would have their own experience about ethical things, and therefore I echo what has been stated so far. The real test or the illustration, I'll give you one or two. One is, let's say, accounting standards. In accounting standard, broadly, I divide them into two parts. By and large, some of the standards tell us what can be done. Some of the standards tell us what cannot be done. Now, a typical creative accountant tries and finds out what is not prohibited to be done. See, there is something which is prohibited, there is something which is allowed, but in between there is something which is not prohibited to be done. Now, I think those who create such situations and implement them in practice, do we call them ethical? I think I'll leave the questions to the listeners, but that's the first starting point. Secondly, there are many corporate results that all of us read. Typically, when an accounting issue is backed by a legal opinion, to me, that's the first starting trouble point. If it is an accounting issue on which clarity exists, I think the board of directors, the audit committee, the CFO must take a view, and the auditors also must be able to take a view. I think when these two parties, let me use the word parties for a looser understanding, when they try to take a shelter of a legal opinion, I would say these are situations which indicate to you that something exists which is not necessarily supported by ethical. So what do you mean by ethical? I think ethical would mean that if there's a situation which you face and you find a solution, can you in very common language explain to somebody else and he would also accept your logic? I think if that is possible, then it is a reasonably ethical. I think that's how one will have to look at it, because these yardsticks keep on changing. But I think in the real life, you find these illustrations which are very common. And the more you read about it, the more you understand them. And lastly, one doesn't have to keep on saying that we are ethical. I think the world at large evaluates who is what. So the more we keep on talking about it, I think the world understands it better as to what the real life situation is. So I think that's the first lesson that all people must accept and put into practice. That's all.
No, I would say that if our position which we take is something which we can defend in public and not be ashamed. That will determine the.
Absolutely. I
Absolutely.
agree.
Absolutely, sir. In a company that I used to work for, they used to say the yardstick of ethical is if what you've done is published in the first page of the newspaper, are you okay with everybody reading about it?
Absolutely.
I think you've hit exactly on that.
Yeah.
I'll just switch topics to globalization, which was one of the topics Raghu sir talked about. Unfortunately, I think he's having technology issues. He'll just join us back. But India has kind of become the accounting hub for a large part of the world today. And it might be, sort of fueled initially by the cost differential and the cost arbitrage. But I think the quality of the Indian accountants is a proven fact now to the rest of the world. So I want to ask you about your experience over the course of your career on how you've seen this transform over the years, what your thoughts on the future for this is, and whether you think this is going to cause brain drain for the country. On the flip side, though it's a good thing for a lot of us, do you think it's also going to cause brain drain? So both sides of the coin.
I think brain drain it would not be, because the Indian economic size will be so substantial that it could match already in IT companies. Some of the rewards which people get in India is not only comparable to international levels, in fact, it's better. So therefore, there is more and more trend which people would like to be back. In fact, my own grandson, we just moved on from Oxford and is working. He says, I'm very clear 5 years down the road, I want to be in India. But that's where the growing economy is. And that's what all his Harvard colleagues and others tell him. So I think this is going to happen, apart from the social reasons like in Canada or other places. And also when they see people, immigrants are more successful, then there's local social problems that generate. So all this will lead to Indian accountants, who you were saying, they'll come because India itself will have a substantial opportunity that will be available, which was not there till 30, 40 years ago when people went either for the doctors or for engineers. Today, it's the other way around. And give another 10 years, it's a different world, different space in India that we live.
I'd like to bring in Raghu, sir.
Of course, I'm a born optimist.
I'd like to bring in Raghu, sir, because one of the pillars he spoke about was global opportunities. So your thoughts.
Yeah, I always believe that there's a challenge for members who are working outside India to come to India. Because when we float a profile to any of our known contacts that this person was in Dubai for 20 years, this person was in Qatar for 20 years, would you like to take him? Let me be very honest, the corporates in India say, no, we are not interested. They are not updated on what is happening in India. They're not aware of the legal laws. So there's one sort of a concern today the overseas members have when they decide to come back to India. But I always tell them, whenever I go to forums overseas and when they invite us and when we talk to them, don't bother. There are a lot of opportunities for you in the consulting space. You might not have an opportunity in the tax consulting space, like direct taxes, indirect audit, but there are a lot of opportunities for you in the consulting space, and you could come with your global experience to India and and started offering this service. And let me tell you, I've come across a lot of professionals who are working for about 2 decades, 3 decades in Australia, US. They come back to India and they set up their own consulting companies, and they're offering niche consulting services, and they're very successful. So I personally believe that these members who have gone from India abroad, maybe the last 30, 40 years, might not be aware of the local tax laws in India, what is happening in GST, what is happening in income tax act, corporate law, but definitely they could be involved in maybe an ERP implementation. They could be involved in a cybersecurity, setting up a cybersecurity framework, or many new things that is coming up. I think these people with global experience could definitely be useful.
Chitale, sir, your thoughts on how it's evolved over the years, how India has become a global hub?
See, two things. This has been a phenomena where the economics drives the people, which is quite true. Last few years, the economics seems to be driving back the people to India, first point. Secondly, I think as far as the intelligence and skills are concerned, we are equally, in fact, sometimes as Indians, we are much better. However, the greatest skill that many of us have got is that we are used to work in spite of administration. See, many people in other countries work with the help of the administration, whereas all of us, at least in the initial years of our career, have been always working even though the administration is not supporting what you are doing. And when I say administration, I mean the overall environment, working, etc., is concerned. So that develops the ability to withstand all challenges and still come out with a solution. I think that's what takes us, many Indians who have worked abroad or who go there and come back, that skill, that even though the environment is not necessarily supportive, how do you find your way out of the situation? I think that's what supports many Indians either here or outside. Coming to the CA profession per se, I think outsourcing service being, coming from abroad to this country, etc., will continue to exist because it's the price differential which will drive that matter. The only question is, again, fundamental point is, a chartered accountant doing that accounting service, does he call himself to be an auditor and still does all the outsourcing service? Or does he purely say it's a consulting service in which he's employing 500 people? I think our basic issues are more on that front, that as expanding services, whichever country you are, if you are in consulting, are you still saying it's a CA service or are you saying it's a consulting service? And is that distinction line clear? And I think the more we talk of globalization, this topic will become much more important than what it is today.
Madam, just to
Sir.
add to what Mr. Chitale Saab said, I think I didn't touch about outsourcing. I think outsourcing would grow in geometric proportion. That is my feeling, number one. And today, what is happening in outsourcing, even CFO services are being outsourced from India. A lot of chartered accountants in India are outsourcing their CFO skills to companies around the world. So according to me, outsourcing would continue and it will grow in geometric proportion. And the opportunities in that space would definitely continue to increase.
No, so far as I'm concerned, Matri, I will say that I do agree with Raghu and Chitale Saab that outsourcing activities will continue to grow. But I'm quite sure that the margins will continue to shrink.
Yeah, I agree.
They are bound to come down.
Very true.
Because it's going to be very, very competitive in the times to come. Because everyone is entering. I have seen Dubai, when the indirect tax was introduced, VAT was introduced. I think there has been so much of inflow of the Indian chartered accountant, the new offices being created there by the Indian chartered accountants, that the rates there now they are realizing that they have brought down the rates. Basically, they have brought down the fee levels there. So I think that is something which I fear, that margins will shrink, and then whether it will be commensurate and whether we will have that differential advantage or not in the times to come, only the time will be able to tell. But yes, outsourcing will definitely grow. So far as our members going abroad, they will continue to go. That much I can say. Of course, there could be certain people at some age level who will be willing to come back, but their age itself will become a bar on coming back. Let's be clear on it. A person who can come back by the age of 40, 45, it's fine. If you want to come back at the age of 55, nobody is willing to take you. I think whether it is abroad or India, beyond 55 today, nobody is interested to take you. Yes, if you want to focus on your own for consulting or something on, then it might work. But if you think that you can be employed somewhere beyond the age of 55, I don't think that's going to happen. But yes, Indians have started thinking on one line. When we talk to some of the friends, that living in India has more comforts. You don't have to wash your own utensils for that matter. You don't have to clean your own house. You have all kind of sport which you don't enjoy there. But yes, still they feel that the quality of life there is much better. The environment is much better. The pollution levels are much lower. I think that is one advantage that they enjoy there. They will have their own, I think, weighing of the advantages and disadvantages and then decide whether to come back or not to come back. It may not be a very easy task for them to come back to the country. But so far as the outflow of the professionals is concerned, it will continue to happen, because we must accept one thing, that $1 is equal to 180 rupees in any case. And if someone can go and then can remit even some amount to invest in India, it continues to grow further. So that is one charm that anybody may have, the pound or euro, whatever levels we are seeing of the currency, unless the rupee appreciates in the times to come. But I don't see that kind of an appreciation happening in the rupee, that the allurement of actually working abroad may come down.
Thank you, sir. We've got about 5 minutes. I'm going to turn the topic to something lighter. You know, you've all held the senior most positions that any of us can imagine as chartered accountants, and it must have been immensely stressful, as I can make out from your interactions with the regulators and things like that. What has been your own formula for dealing with stress every day? So just quickly around the room.
I think balance in everything that one does, and it doesn't create any stress. And be equanimous in adversity and success.
Chitale, sir.
See, I think it's a sense of moderation which takes you through any situation. First point. Secondly, working in a public position, as long as you don't expect anything to get out of it in a personal manner, things don't go beyond a proportion. And in personal manner, as long as you keep your work and personal life separate, I think things work very well. These are the three things which are easy to follow, and they keep you more contented and happy. Thank you.
See, Maitri, you work for something. After all, if you contested elections, you wanted some position to be taken. And if you have gone there, I think firstly that satisfaction of reaching that level is too good. And that really boosts you, and that really creates some kind of an energy in you, which you can take some of the challenges, even with the regulators for that matter. And when you are dealing with the regulators, you are trying to balance out the situation between the institute and the regulators. It is not that you are fighting with them. You don't have to fight. And I don't think there is a kind of a stress when you deal with the regulators. If you keep your mind in balance, basically, and you don't have basically tensions. Yes, to me, the tension would be more as a president of the institute that my result should be out in time. There should be no leakage of the paper. That can be a stress, but dealing with the regulator is not a stress. Let's be very clear. Till the time I am doing my job professionally, and I am trying to do my job for the sake of the profession and for the sake of the society, I must keep one thing in my mind, that when I am dealing with the regulator, I am not only trying to say that I want more work for my profession. I will say how you are giving work to the profession will help the stakeholders. I think that is something that we have to keep in mind. And if you can convince them on even one of the points, you feel happy with that.
I think I would agree with all the three past presidents. Our life as president used to be very stressful because you're working with regulators, you're handling your disciplinary matters, you are handling the examination issues, you're traveling around the world, you're traveling various parts of the country. Life is very stressful, both physically and emotionally. But yes, you have friends around you. Like we operate through committees. We have the vice president for the president. Then we have various committees where you have an issue. You discuss with your colleagues in the council and try to see how best you can reduce this. Because for any stress-related activity, there should be a problem. Let us say there's a problem. For you to get a solution, you will have people around you. And one way which I used to reduce my stress is to speak to my friends around me, maybe the vice president, maybe executive committee members, or the examination committee members. If there's a problem, be frank enough to discuss with them, take their views. And that was one way of helping me to reduce my stress level. But yes, as a president, you need to take certain amount of additional stress, which, as Amarjit Chopra rightly said, once you sit on the chair, you have that extra energy. God gives you that extra energy to take the stress. And all of us have been able to manage that stress.
Fantastic input, sir. Be moderate, balance things, find your purpose. And then once you find your purpose, really enjoy it. And of course, have friends and have people around you who you can rely on. I think these are things that we can all rely on. It's been an absolutely delightful afternoon, spent listening to all your deep insights, You've gained this from years of experience, and thanks for sharing that. I think the Institute's motto, which is Ya Esha Suktesha Jagarti, it's fully justified. So you've awakened in all of us a renewed passion for our profession. So thanks a lot for this afternoon, and I would love to go on, but we're running short of time, and I'll have to hand over to Dr. Mithali.
Thank you, Maitri. Thank you, Maitri.
Thank you, Maitri. And the topic was such, and our past presidents have been so kind enough and gracious that this discussion can go on and on. But like it is said that every good thing has to come to an end and a closure, so is with this panel discussion. So heartfelt gratitude to all our esteemed panelists and to the moderator of the session, who have actually dealt with so many issues, not only issues, but new horizons also, where we talked about one problem, one regulator, ethical dilemmas, then accounting standards, auditing standards, brain drain, stress, and so many other things, which really needs to be looked upon in the profession as well as in the institute. So from the entire team of ICI and research committee, thank you Vishwanath sir, Chitle sir, Chopra sir, Raghu sir, and Maitri ma'am for sparing your precious time and sharing the insights and new horizons for the institute and to our members. And most importantly, to our members who have joined the session for listening and exchange of information. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thanks to all.
Thank you.